Okay. Welcome everyone to Fundamentals of Kabbalah and Chassidut. We are continuing our series, The Life and Teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. We'll be learning from Keter Shem Tov, the book we've been learning from for probably around 6 weeks now. I do want to make an important announcement that those who are watching now and many who are going to watch this video later. Right now, my intention is to continue this series up till around Pesach, which is in about 2 more months. But what I think I want to do is, the name of this series has been The Life and Teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. And we've spent the vast majority of learning the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, which of course are so important, but I have a feeling that I want to get back a little bit to the life of the Baal Shem Tov, to get back to some of the stories, how his life developed, how the Hasidic movement developed, and perhaps we'll get back to more of his teachings. I've enjoyed it immensely, having to prepare from Keter Shem Tov. But my feeling is that I want to balance it a bit more and start learning a little bit more about the life of the Baal Shem Tov, which I think is just as valuable and important. So hopefully next week, like I said, we might get back to the Keter Shem Tov, but I think we have something to look forward to delving back into the life of the Baal Shem Tov. L'chaim, everyone, l'chaim. For those who are following, we are on Kuf Yud Bet. Torah Kuf Yud Bet. So it starts like this. Mea Baal Shem Tov. As I've explained, that all of these teachings were not written by the Baal Shem Tov himself. They're all coming from his students or his students of his students who heard these Torahs from the Baal Shem Tov or from the students of the Baal Shem Tov, and they compiled it into what we call Keter Shem Tov. So it says here, Mevu'ar b'kitvei ha'arizal, that it's made clear in the writings of the Arizal, she'ein tefillah shel yom zeh domeh letefillah yom acher ad biyat HaMashiach. In other words, just like every day is different than the preceding day, that's how time works. Also, every prayer each day is by necessity, by definition, needs to be different. So he says that this is what it means. V'zeu kavanat Mishnah. So when the Baal Shem said that, when the Baal Shem said that each day's prayer is different, the Baal Shem was saying this is what it means in the Mishnah, where it says in the Mishnah Brachot, "Ve'oseh tefiloto keva, ein tefiloto tachununim." So this is a very well-known Mishnah, where it said that someone who makes their prayer keva here means that my prayer today is exactly like it was yesterday. Now, the words may be the same. We know that when we daven the morning prayer, the afternoon prayer, the evening prayer, the basic text is the same every single day. Someone lives to 120 years, will be saying the same Shachrit, the same Mincha, the same Maariv. But that's not what he meant here. It meant that even though the text is the same, that someone who doesn't have any new insight, any new aspect to their prayer, in a sense, it's not even called prayer. Doesn't even fit into the definition of prayer. So then the Baal Shem Tov says like this. He says, Machshavot zarot sheba'in la'adam be'emtza tefilato. This is something that we have dealt with in different aspects before. When strange thoughts come to a person in the middle of their praying, Hem misod shvira v'rafach nitzutzin shetzarech adam levarer b'chol yom. So where are these strange thoughts coming from? So he says in a Kabbalistic way, these are coming from the fallen sparks of the breaking of the vessels, the 288 sparks of light that have been trapped in their descent into the world in their broken vessels. And he says that a person needs to clarify them every day. In other words, this is something we have discussed, and it's very important because when we just talk about Shvira Kelim, so there's a tendency to think of Shvira Kelim as this one-time catastrophic event that happened in the evolution, the development of creation, where in a previous world, the lights were too strong for the vessels, and they shattered the vessels. And this light of that world fell with the vessels. So we could look at it like, okay, it happened one time, and that's it. But Shvira Kelim is an ongoing reality. We've discussed this a number of times, and it's important here because that's what the Baal Shem is saying, is that every day we're dealing with the aftermath of the breaking of the vessels. It's not like it happened once and that's it. It is an ongoing intellectual, psychological, emotional reality that we all deal with. And you've heard me say this before, but I'll say it again, that some of the terms that we use to express our going through an experience of Shvira Kelim is, I can't handle this. This is too much for me. I'm freaking out. I have to get out of here. I need my space. This is too much for me. I can't handle it. These are all expressions of exactly what happened with Shvira Kelim. The light was too great, and the vessels couldn't hold the light. And so when we feel that a situation is just too much energy, too much stress, too much light, too much, I think stress is the best word here. We are going through a repeat of Shvira Kelim. So that's what the Baal Shem is saying here. If the person is praying and all of a sudden has these off-the-wall kind of thoughts in the middle of praying, it means that these are fallen sparks that are in need of rectification. So he continues by saying, so as the Baal Shem Tov has said, that if these thoughts are coming, they need a tikkun. So if you have, and the Baal Shem has made this clear, if you have the spiritual, emotional, intellectual presence at the time to understand why these thoughts are coming to you and what their tikkun is, then that's what one should do. But if they're coming and they're just confusing you, like what's going on? I don't know why I'm thinking this. Like, then he says, push them away. Push them away. If you can't lift them up, then push them away. He continues, Ve'ein machshavot zarot shel yom zeh domeh lemachshavot zarah shel machar. So just like the Ari said, today's prayer isn't like yesterday's. And if it's exactly the same, then you have to look in the mirror to understand, am I praying at all? Or am I just going on automatic pilot? I know the words by heart. I know what I have to say to fulfill my obligation. And we're just on automatic pilot. So that's what's called, it's not really prayer. So he says that just like no prayer is the same one day after the other, the kind of strange thoughts that we might have also aren't going to be the same. Each one needs its own rectification. And he says that someone who pays attention will understand this, will understand that each day is an opportunity to connect to God in a way that yesterday could not have given us. And then he brings an example. He brings an example of how do you fix these strange thoughts. So he brings an idea. He says, Imhu hirhure nashim. Now here he's talking to men, but it could be for women also. In other words, the type of strange thoughts that we're having all of a sudden in the middle of prayer are sexual in nature. Yikaven lahalotan. But a person can lift them up. But how? They can lift them up b'shorshan shehu chesed. So, in other words, if someone is having a strange sexual thought in the middle of trying to connect with God, so he's saying what it is, it's a hint to love. But here you're getting not like the most positive picture of love. But what he's saying, but that's what the thought is coming. The thought is coming because it's a fallen spark of imagination of love. So you fix it by lifting it up to the love of God. I know it sounds too simple, but that's what he's saying, is that instead of, let's say, getting freaked out because I'm having this sexual thought in the middle of trying to connect to God. So he's saying it's because there is a fixing that has to be done here. And the fixing is by transforming fallen types of love to the love of God. And then he brings a verse that is a very mysterious verse, where it says, he says, this is the secret of this verse. It says, V'ish asher yikach et achoto chesedhu. This is in, I'll tell you 1 second. It's in Parshat Kedoshim, in the book of Vayikra, the 20th chapter, the 17th verse. It says, if a man would lie with his sister, have relations with his sister. So we know that that's forbidden. And it's, like off the wall. But the Torah amazingly says chesedhu. It's a chesed. Now everyone questions this. What can that possibly mean? Because usually we understand the word chesed as being very positive types of love, charity, giving, chesed, loving kindness. So why would the Torah call a forbidden relationship chesedhu? So it has confounded many people. But with the way the Baal Shem Tov is interpreting this is saying, he's just using this as an example. If one has a thought of a forbidden relationship, it's crying out for a fixing. Obviously, if a person has this kind of thought, means somewhere in their unconscious, subconscious, there's an opening for this, or the Yetzer Hara is trying to make an opening by having you have such a thought. Obviously, person's not thinking of sexual fantasies when they're davening the Amida. But what happens if that kind of thought comes to you? So it needs one of two things. It needs to be fixed, or it needs to be pushed away. And the way the Baal Shem explains, how do you know the difference? When do you push it away and say, Yetzer Hara, you're disgusting. I'm trying to pray to God and you're sending me these thoughts? Get out of here. I don't want any part of you. That's very legitimate. That's a very legitimate response. But the Baal Shem Tov, in many of his teachings, was trying to show that there is actually a different possible message here. And that is, when we get these thoughts, and of course we don't know why they're coming to us in the middle of a holy moment. The Baal Shem Tov says it's because you need to fix this. And therefore, it's called chesedhu. Why? Is because you can have the possibility of taking this fallen, broken kind of sexual fantasy that one is having and transform it into the love of God. That is the chesed here. The chesed is that even this kind of thought can be fixed and can be transformed into the love of God. But as we said before, this can only be done if a person is aware and conscious that this is the message and this is what I can do with this strange thought that I don't really want to have now. Yes, I see Dara just sent a chat that Dara, at the end of the class, will have, send that chat again quickly, please. And I'll dedicate the class right now. I'll read it quickly. Because I don't want to open the chats now. Just send it again and it should flash on my screen. Maybe. Yaakov ben Shalom, a very holy neshama in the New York community. Yankel Dinnerstein. So dear, I forgot about this, but thank you for reminding me. He should have an aliyat neshama on his yurt site, and our learning should be a schut for his neshama. Gary, you could say a few words at the end. Okay, so that was this teaching. We've gone through this before. As I've mentioned, Keter Shem Tov was compiled by many different students. And so sometimes there's repetition in the different teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, but each student heard it a little bit different. And so they all come here. This is this is one of the most deepest matters in the Baal Shem Tov. This idea of how to fix strange thoughts, not just during prayer, because at work, walking along the way, we're thinking about something, then all of a sudden we get thoughts that are seemingly coming from nowhere. And we always have to say, well, what do you do with this? Now, a lot of the time it is the Yetzer Hara trying to throw us off track. As the Gemara says, the Yetzer Hara is literally trying to kill us every day, spiritually, sometimes even physically. But so sometimes the Baal Shem says, yeah, you just have to kick the Yetzer Hara out of your mind. Don't give it any juice, any energy. Just get out of here. But other times, if we have the capability then to grab that thought and turn it around, fix it, raise it up, elevate it. This was a very, very new kind of idea from the Baal Shem Tov that he gave over. Okay, continuing on. Kuf Yud Chet. Kuf Yud Chet. Now here, I have to admit that many of these Torahs from the Baal Shem Tov, he first brings a verse. And then it seems like he changes gears altogether. And then sometimes he'll come back and show that what he just explained is a deeper meaning of this verse that he brought in the beginning that we didn't really understand what's the connection. But other times, he will bring a verse in the beginning and then, as I said, kind of change gears and give some kind of an explanation and not come back and explain what's the connection with the verse that was brought. So this happens fairly often. And a lot of times you have to what's called break your head to try to see the connection. Because here we're not standing in front of the Baal Shem Tov that we could say, Rebbe, I didn't quite understand this. Like, what's the connection of this verse that you brought? Anyways, I like this Torah very much, but I have to admit, I don't really understand the connection to the verse that he brings in. But the reason I want to give it over is he gives 3 examples of different people who deal with a similar kind of situation in 3 different ways. And I think this applies to so many people. So he says, Aleph. So the first kind of person is like this. She'eino holech b'derech tova. Here is a person who's not going in a good way. They're not acting properly. They're just, it's not a positive direction this person is going. Ve'eino margish bo. And they don't realize that they're not on the right path. They're just going about their business. They might be morally and ethically challenged. They might have very negative opinions about this, that, or the other thing, but they don't pay it any mind. They're just doing their thing. Bezehu benukva de tahoma rabba. This is a Kabbalistic term that this person has fallen into very deep depths, but they don't know it. They don't know it. They're not really aware of how off the path they are acting. That's one kind of person. Then he brings another person. Here is a person who knows that they're not on the right path. They're not doing properly. They're not fulfilling their potential. They're perhaps doing many things wrong, morally, ethically, spiritually. Umikol makom holech b'derchahu ve'ena mitpalel al atzmo. Nonetheless, they continue to go in this way, and they do not even pray to change it. This is a person who is accepted that I'm in a bad way, and there's nothing I can do about it. That's just my fate. That's my destiny. If they have low esteem, they might think I probably deserve this. I'm getting back what I put out. So the first person is, we'll call it off the path and doesn't even realize it. The second person realizes it, but doesn't do anything about it. It's just they're stuck, and they don't even take the time to pray for a change. And then he brings a third person. Again, he's like the second person. He knows, or she knows, that they're not going in the right way. Knows that they're not going in the right way. But umit palel lashem shi'azor lo ze oseh yichud. But this person wants to change. This person realizes they need help, and they turn to Hashem. And he ends by saying, this person, it says oseh yichud, literally means they can make a unification. But I think what he really means here is the first person is off the path, doesn't even care. The second person, or doesn't even know. It's just like, that's just the way it is. That's how it is. The second person knows they're not doing right, but doesn't have the strength, the confidence, the faith to do anything about it. Yes, I'm not doing right, but I'm stuck. But the third person also knows they're not doing right, but they get it together to ask Hashem for help. So it's a very simple Torah, but I think at different times in our life, or different times of people that we know, fall into these three different categories. And this is just a kind of a typical, call it psychological analysis of the Baal Shem Tov. And his great-grandson, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, so he took this idea of the psychology of real people in real time, and spent a lot of time trying to bring a Torah perspective. So obviously this last person, in essence, what they're doing is tshuva. He doesn't say it outright, but here, I'm not going in the right direction. So I pray to change it. So that is, this person is involved in tshuva. Okay, the next one is Kuf Chaf. Kuf Chaf. Ki yesh l'tzorach lehitchazek techila kodem hatefila. So now the Baal Shem is also getting into a very, very important area. He says that there is a great need to strengthen oneself before they pray. כדי שיהיה לו מוחין להתפלל, בלי מחשבה זרה. Why do we have to strengthen ourselves? In order that we have the state of mind, the state of emotion to actually pray without falling into all kinds of confusing thoughts. I'll call panim o b'dveikut. Now, either so that we're centered enough that we can just get through the prayers without thinking about what business meeting I have to get to, what I have to do, what bill I have to pay, how am I going to get to work today, etc., etc. Or he says, or to be able to pray with real clinging to God. So here he says that here's something we can understand. You wake up in the morning, somewhat tired. You wake up a little bit late. You have 5 minutes, to get to minyan or to start your prayers. And the truth is, you're not in the headspace whatsoever to pray. But you want to be a good Jew, and you're supposed to pray Shachrit, and you're not going to have time later, so I got to do it now. Okay, there's a great merit for that. There's a great merit that instead of just saying, forget it, I can't daven today. I just can't daven today, forget it. Instead, the person is, no, I'm dedicated. I know what the right thing to do is. The question is, though, are we in the right frame of mind? So that's why he's just simply saying that there's a great need to strengthen oneself in order to be able to pray. And now he's going to give some advice. Mizmorim o Torah sheyitasek techila. And two advices are to say a few Tehillim before you even start. It could even be sing a few songs to get in the mood, or learn some Torah. Learn for 5 minutes, learn for 20 minutes. Umitoch kach hu omed lipalel mitoch divrei Torah sheyesh lo mochin. So why is he giving this advice? Because by saying a few Tehillim, maybe meditating, or learning Torah, then one has become settled, their minds have become settled, and they have Torah inspiration in their mind already. They learned a little bit. They meditated a little. They sang a little bit. They said some Tehillim a little bit. Now I'm settled. I have a certain amount of peace of mind. Now I can pray. V'yesheim yirbeh mizmorim o Torah kodem latefila lo yelo mochin betefila. So now he says something interesting. He said, but I'm advising, don't learn for 2 hours before you pray, or say, half the book of Tehillim. He says, because then when you get ready to pray, you're going to be kind of tired. You've already learned for an hour or two, and now you're only going to start praying. Not everyone can do that. So he says, "V'zeh shekatuv echad hamarbeh v'echad hamamit ubilvad shikaven libo l'shamayim." So this is, one second. This comes from the Gemara in Menachot, a very, very important statement where it says, it's not important if you do a lot or if you do a little, as long as you direct your heart to heaven. A very, very important statement, because some people will be like, well, if I don't learn for 2 hours, like it's like nothing. So what he's saying, he's bringing this very, very famous statement is, in many, many matters in life, it doesn't matter if you say one, let's say one pre-prayer with your whole heart, or you just ramble through something for 45 minutes. It doesn't matter either way, as long as what you're doing is you're directing your heart to heaven. That's what matters. So that's a very important statement that the Baal Shem is bringing here. So for one person, saying one short prayer or singing one little song or meditating for 1 minute could equal someone else who has a lot more capability, and they can do it for an hour. He says it doesn't matter as long as your heart is directed to heaven. So what's interesting here is that Chabad, in great measure, goes by this teaching here. Most people in Chabad will learn before they daven. And I'm not talking about for just a minute or two. Many, many in yeshivas, individuals, and minions, before they daven, they sit and they learn so that they get into a Torah framework, headspace, and then they daven. So here's an example of a lot of people who took this Torah and follow it. It wasn't just like a nice theoretic Torah. And the reason is, as I said before, because we're human beings, and it's not so easy. Just wake up in the morning, and within 10 minutes you have talis and tefillin on, and you're davening. Many people need to get, we'll call it, in the mood, in the space, the headspace, the emotional space. So this is a very important teaching for the Baal Shem. Each person can do it in the way that works for them. He's really not saying it has to be this way or another, and that's why he brings, it's not important if you do a lot or you do a little, as long as you direct your mind and your heart to heaven. But he's giving some advice here. He's giving some advice that don't just jump into the prayers when your head is, you're not ready for it. You're not ready for it. Do something that works for you to put yourself into a prayerful state of mind. So this is a very, very important teaching from the Baal Shem Tov. Okay, we have time, I think, for one more. This is also very, very real psychological type of Torah here. It says like this. Inyan hachayot ratzov v'shov. This is going to discuss the idea of the angels in Ezekiel's vision who are running and returning. As we've learned many times, this concept of ratzo v'shov, running and returning. What it means is the dynamic of the universe, the way the tides come in and they come out, how the heart beats in and out, how the blood pulses through the veins, how we breathe in and out, AC, DC, all of the opposites in the world, This is the dynamic of the world is called Ratso V'Shav. So what is he going to say about this? He says, Ki neshama achar shechutzva mimakom kadosh ru'ui shetit lahev tamid el makom michatzvata. He says like this, when a soul is quite literally carved out, mined from the holy place in heaven that it is coming from, ever since then, the soul is wanting always to go back to the place that it was taken from. In other words, that's why the soul many times is compared to a flame, where the flame is always trying to go up, to return to Shemayim. Shemayim is Eish and Mayim. That the soul comes from a very, very holy place, and the soul will always remember that. So the soul is always wanting, in a sense, to return to its heavenly abode. Upen titbatel b'metziyut. But the Baal Shem Tov says that's a big problem, because if the soul always acted like this, it would become nullified to reality. It would not be able to deal with reality. So he says, L'chein, l'chach, sivava b'chomer sheta'aseh gam kein inyanim chomarim, kamo achila v'shtiya umasa umatan ukuyotze. So he says, therefore, God has arranged it that the physical material world that we live in is what holds us into this world. Like eating and drinking and doing business and just going about our physical material needs in this world. So here he's saying something like simple but profound. He's saying that if the neshama is left to its own devices, it wouldn't be able even to relate to the body or this world or reality. God sent a soul into this world for a reason. And once it's sent into the world, it's good that the soul remembers what its ultimate abode is. It's good that the soul is always seeking to reunify with God. But if it's too much, then a person can't deal with this world. And we know that there are souls like this. There are souls that never feel at home in this world. They just never can really operate in this world because their soul is always, in a sense, trying to get out of this world and return to its home. But here he says God has done this on purpose. Shelo titalech tamid be'avodat Hashem yibarach b'so tikun v'kiyum ima neshama. So now he says that what happens from this reality is, that's why he brings in the beginning. Here's an example. He brings something in the beginning, and then he seems to like turn to other matters. It started with Ratso V'Shov. And so here what he's saying is the soul is always wanting to run back to holiness, to spirituality, to God, to the root of the soul. But God didn't make the world that way. There has to be a return. And so God made a human being with a holy soul and a physical body. And we struggle to harmonize those two aspects. So therefore, what he's going to say now is, V'chein hu b'madrigot hasvirot katnut v'gadlut. So he says the result of the existential reality of a human being is we're in a constant state of running and returning, of constant dealing with the needs of the soul and the needs of the body. And here he takes the language of the Arizal, who calls this katnut v'gadlut, small-mindedness and expanded mindedness, or expanded consciousness. We're in constant flux between running and returning, physical and spiritual, soul and body. So now he says, Od yesh lomar v'achayot ratzov v'shov. And now he is coming back to ratzov v'shov. Ki ta'anug t'midi na'aseh teva ve'eno ta'anug. So he says, divine pleasure or physical pleasure or spiritual pleasure that are constant, they become regular. And they don't become pleasurable anymore. In other words, if we had, in this world right now, if we had Shabbat every day, at a certain point, what he's saying is, we would get tired of it. It wouldn't be pleasure anymore because it would be constant. And so therefore, God has arranged this world according to this dynamic called Ratzov v'Shov, that there are moments of divine pleasure or physical pleasure, and there are times that we don't have it. Because if we had it all the time, it's like a few examples is like a good chocolate chip cookie. Wow. That gives us physical pleasure. Or hearing your favorite song. So that is like, it just sparks the soul. But what happens if you now eat the second chocolate chip cookie and the third chocolate chip cookie? First of all, you get sick to your stomach. And that song that was so special, if you hear it on like a tape, it becomes music. It loses its pleasure. So the Baal Shem continues, L'chach Adam oleh v'yored ba'avodat Hashem Yibarach. Says, therefore, even in serving God, there are times that we go up and there are times that we come down. We even see this in the davening. Let's say we build up to the Amida. We go, according to Kabbalah, we go through the four worlds, go through the morning brachas, Psukei de Zimra, the Shema, and then the Amida. The high point, you get to the Amida. What do we do on most days right after the Amida? We do Tachanun, and we fall on our arm like this. It's a descent back into the world. So that's what the Baal Shem Tov says, that this was, in a certain way, all planned by God. Because if the soul was only concerned with the soul, it wouldn't be able to fulfill its purpose in this world. To be a soul and a body, and to take physical and spiritual and unify them and make the best of it. So he says, even with Avodat Hashem, that's why we have Shabbos once a week, 6 days you shall work, and the 7th you should have Shabbos. That's why Rosh Hashanah doesn't come 20 times in the year, one time. And when it comes, it is strong, it's intense, it's deep, it's beautiful. And then life goes on. So the Baal Shem continues. Listen what he says here. Why do we have to have all these rises and falls? He says it's so that we can have what he calls pleasure, divine pleasure. Because if it wasn't like that, whatever divine pleasure we would be having would become ordinary. We wouldn't appreciate it anymore. And that's why we've mentioned this before. A lot of people, when it's a 3-dayer, let's say 2 days of holiday and then Shabbat, that a lot of people by the end are like, get me back to the week. It was beautiful. It was great, but I'm not meant to live here permanently. Time for the week again. So it's obvious that this is a very, very deep psychological understanding of human beings, of our existential reality of being a soul in a body, being spiritual and physical. But as we said in the beginning, God turned everything that it would be like this. And then he says, he says, because that is the essential purpose of serving God, is in a certain way for us to have pleasure and to give pleasure to God. And to do that, though, we have to be in an elevated state of mind. And the Baal Shem Tov is saying, realistically, we can't be there all the time. So there's going to be highs, there's going to be lows. When we're high, we have to realize that we're not going to stay there. And when we're low, we have to realize we're not going to stay there either. There'll be better times. So this is a classic psychological, emotional Torah from the Baal Shem Tov. That is, it's so good to know, because sometimes when we trudge through life, it's like we're bemoaning our fates. But the Baal Shem Tov is saying those moments are important also, because without those moments, we wouldn't appreciate the highs. And then he says, and we'll end with this. He says, "V'zeh shekatuv zot Torah Olah." This is the teaching of the Olah offering. The Olah offering was the only offering that was completely consumed on the altar. And it's called an elevation offering. So he says, Ki hamiyut she'ein olah lo avodah tama umitzta'er al zeh hu atachlit shel aliyah sheyeh lo az yoter tanug. So here he says somewhat of a paradoxical idea. He's saying that the Torah of the Olah, the teaching of this elevation offering, is that, truthfully, we can't always be in this kind of state that we can be in an elevated state of mind. And those times that we're not, so sometimes we feel the lack. And the Baal Shem Tov says that's good. That's why we can't be elevated all the time. Because if we were elevated all the time, it would actually lose its definition of being elevated, because it's not reality. It's not how God created a human being, to be always in the highest level. We strive for it, and we want to be there most of the time. Of course, that goes with almost without saying. But what about the times that it's just not happening? I woke up tired today. Something upset me. I'm not inspired today. So he says that when we can now compare that and we feel the difference, I feel uninspired, so that will inspire me to get inspired again, and then the tanug will come back. That will be the tanug. So we need moments of not being in spiritual pleasure in order to rise up once again, even stronger, to get to that place. So this is a lot to think about here. And so I'm just going to mention now, because some people came on later, that my intention at least is, starting next week, that we will go back to the life of the Baal Shem Tov and start discussing different periods of his life, different things that he went through, and different teachings of his in the context of his actual experience and the life that he led. May we always be inspired by the Baal Shem Tov.